Hey, with us now, we got member of the Armed Services and Foreign Relations Committees, Democratic Senator Tim Kaine of Virginia. He's long called for Congress to vote on a war authorization against ISIS. That's just not happening, is it? Why not?
You know, Joe, in bottom line, Congress would rather just criticize the president and say, you don't have a strategy, or this is going wrong, or that's going wrong, but they don't want to be held accountable. Have the hearing, pepper the witnesses with questions, and then vote yes or no. And it, sadly, is bipartisan in both houses. So I have not been able to yet convince my colleagues. This is a war that tactically we're doing what we need to do, but Congress hasn't authorized the war. And second, in Syria, we've got some major international law questions, I think, about the war.
Well, the thing is, Senator, we also, though, I mean, when you start talking about strategy, nobody can answer the big question. I mean, we can't, as a nation, answer the big question. Congress can't. And that is, do you have the leader of Syria stay or go?
Right, right. You know, that was an ambivalence right early. I think President Obama, my intuition is that he wishes he had the words Assad must go back, right, because it really isn't up to the United States to set the terms for who the leader of another country is. Could we say Assad's a war criminal? We're going to file, you know, complaints against Assad in The Hague. I mean, there's all kinds of things you could say about his war crimes, his barbarous activities. But to say Assad must go, the U.S. can't set the terms for the leadership.
The problem is, though, how do you go into a country where somebody has committed the war crimes that Assad has committed and continues to commit, bombs a Doctors Without Borders hospital.
Yep.
Last night? I mean, it's on the front page of all the papers. It puts us in a terrible position. I agree with you. We can't decide who's going to stay, who's going to go, though Bill Clinton and a lot of Republicans, Democrats did it in the 1990s in the Balkans. But how do we even start without being able to answer that big question?
Here was a... here was a fork in the road where I think we made the wrong turn. We could still do it. In February 2014, the UN Security Council passed a resolution that called for cross-border delivery of humanitarian aid into Syria without Assad's permission, that we could do that. The world community at that point should have set up a humanitarian safe zone in northern Syria, and we would call it a humanitarian zone. This is for you. If you're fleeing Assad, ISIL, or cholera, or hunger, you can come here and you're going to be safe. And oh, by the way, if anybody messes with you, we're going to have military assets to protect this humanitarian zone that the UN has called for.
Why didn't we do it?
You know, I think there was a reluctance to use military assets to protect it. At that point, it would have been a lot simpler, because the issues since then between the Kurds and the Turks and with the Russian engagement has made that real estate more complicated. But look, there's still 8 million displaced Syrians inside Syria who could leave tomorrow. 4 million have left.
Why
many more could leave?
I still think we should do a safe zone there? I mean, this is not only a crisis in Syria. It's not only a regional crisis. It's now a crisis for Europe. It is a crisis across the globe. Why can't we create the world community create a safe zone for these refugees to return home?
Look, there wasn't a commitment to use the military assets to protect the humanitarian mission, but now we're using military assets to battle. So, you know, this was something, I mean, I'll say, we were talking at the break about Senator McCain, the Armed Services Chair. He was calling for this in 2013, and I wasn't convinced until the UN Security Council passed the resolution. Russia didn't veto it. We were smart enough to put it on the table during the Sochi Winter Olympics, and Russia was worried about being an apologist for Assad's brutality when everybody was watching him. So they accepted the resolution, and at that point we had an international legal predicate to do this, and we would have probably kept a couple million people in Syria had we done it.
For people watching at home right now, if you can boil it down and say the American strategy in Syria is blank, how do you explain it?
Well, here's what I'd say, but then it's not as clear as it should be, and I'll tell you why not. It is basically to shrink the ISIL battle space, and that's been succeeding in both Iraq and Syria. The real estate that they were gaining is shrinking. That's good, and it's continued to put pressure on them to shrink their battle space and defeat them. The problem is ISIL now knows their days on the battlefield are numbered. So what they're deciding to do is, okay, we are numbered on the battlefield, so let's just bomb an airliner in the Sinai or go into Brussels or go into Paris or Ankara or Istanbul. They're moving all around because they know the battlefield space is shrinking. And the reason that we haven't really gotten to the strategy is, how do you get to a strategy on something like this? That's why a congressional war declaration is important. The president comes and has to make the case, and usually proposes an authorization. And Congress doesn't accept what the president proposes. Congress puts the State Department and military witnesses in the dock, asks them tough questions, takes the president's originally proposed authorization and changes it. President Bush presented one authorization after 9/11. Congress didn't pass it. They ended up changing it. That's how you work on a strategy, and you do it with the American public watching, so that eventually when Congress votes, the American public have been brought into what's at stake. No. We haven't done it because Congress just wants to, fly-spec the president, say you're not doing it right. Mm-hmm. But boy, don't ask us to vote yes or no. It's like a, hide under the table.
Our presidents treat the War Powers Act like optional suggestion. And not in a serious way. Is your candidate in this race, Hillary Clinton, going to treat Congress, a co-equal branch, with more respect regarding war powers than the current president does, if she wins?
Here's my gut feeling about it. We haven't talked about this. She was a senator. She was a senator.
So was Barack Obama. Yep. How about talking to her about it before she wins?
She was a senator, and I think she gets the prerogatives of this. And look, President Obama and I talk about this too. And when I'm pounding on him about war authorization, sometimes his staff gets mad at me, but he'll say to me, "Look, I was a senator. I know what you mean. But maybe I'm focused on this stuff because it was Virginians like Madison and others who put this into the Constitution. We are so radical by having a system of government where we're not supposed to be at war without a vote of Congress." Throughout human history and still in the world, war is for the king or the prince or the president or the monarch or the emperor. Here it's supposed to be only initiated by Congress, but both parties, both houses for a very long time.
Why don't you try to get a commitment from Hillary Clinton before she might get elected president to treat it differently than the past president?
I have a high degree of confidence in somebody like her who's been an armed services member and also the nation's chief diplomat.